I'm very excited to have Rabbi Strassfeld back with us for our third and final session. And we've talked about the catalog. I showed you the table of contents of the amazing book he wrote on kind of day to day, week to week, and the cycle of both the life cycle and the year cycle book he wrote, which is fantastic to give to anyone as a starting place, no matter kind of where they're starting from. And then I just want to mention also that he and his amazing partner, Joy, have made available once again to us the Haggadah that they edited, the Reconstructionist Haggadah, A Night of Questions. And so we will be using that again this year for our communal Seder, which again is going to be on Zoom. For first night, we will be using their Haggadah. So I encourage you to purchase one, tell other people to purchase one to support their work. And they have just been incredibly gracious to offer it to us at no cost.
Excuse me, Rabbi Amy, where do we get it? Where do we buy it?
Michael, where's the best way for them to get it?
Probably through the movement.
So the Reconstructionist Press. So just go to, Reconstructing Judaism. Just go there. And I'm sure because it's Pesach coming, they'll have a link. Thank you, Robin, for asking. And purchase one there. But it's just an incredibly generous thing that they've done to make the PDF available online, again, for us to use with so many households. And that's a huge gift to the movement and to the progressive part of the Jewish people again this year. So thank you and Yasher Koach,
thank you,
Michael, on that. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, I just actually, I don't know I can't remember whether this got mentioned by me or you. I do a weekly newsletter that usually is focused on the Torah portion or just what's happening in the world, and it's a teaching and has other components like I record a song, usually most often a Hasidic nigun, it's free. Anybody can subscribe, and you can also just unsubscribe if it doesn't really speak to you. But maybe you could send out the information to everybody who signed up for the class.
Absolutely. So Missy, will you please make a note that we need to send out Rabbi Strassfeld's the link to sign up for his newsletter to both the Torah study group on Friday, the Torah study group on Saturday, and everyone who registered for any one of these classes.
Thanks.
That would be awesome. And I share it, Michael, with my Torah study. So they are exposed, but we should probably make it really easy for them to just
they can and someone can just go to my website, which is cleverly michaelstrassfeld.com. So.
Very, very clever.
George, did you want to say something?
I wanted to say hello, but I couldn't.
Hello.
George was saying the host wouldn't let him speak. So
Yes.
I'll let you speak, George Walcon. So maybe...
The host has now allowed me to speak.
So Mark said, can we do the link in the chat? So again, if someone could just type in michaelstrassfeld.com.
Sure.
Yes, I'll do it once my screen is not shared.
Okay. So let's begin. For this third and last session, the focus will be a little different in terms of topic, and as it was announced, it has to do with what is our responsibility to other people. And there's a concept in the Jewish tradition of there's a phrase Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh or Zeh Lazeh. Two versions means the same thing. All of Israel is Arevim, are responsible for each other. That there is a sense of responsibility and I and lots of other people want to read that, not just about being responsible to other Jews, but really being responsible to other people. And of course, it's I think a notion that we all try to live by, and yet it's challenging, right? It's like where is my responsibility? Where does it begin, and where does it end? And in the context of the world we live in, where there's so many societal problems that are the solutions are not clear, and so whether it's hunger, racism, homelessness, it's on and on. What can I do? What's my responsibility? And clearly, it isn't my responsibility to solve all those problems myself, but it's also not appropriate that I just say, well, since I can't solve it, I can't do anything, or, it's not my problem. And so I wanted to begin looking at this with a passage you see on the screen. It's from Devarim, from Deuteronomy chapter 21. And it's this strange ritual. So let me just, I'll read the English, and you could see the Hebrew if you can read the font that's small. And then we'll talk about it some, and we'll see how the rabbinic tradition takes this text and interprets it. So if in the land that the Lord your God is assigning you to possess, right, the land of Israel, so this is in Deuteronomy, they haven't gone into the land yet. So this is basically, when you get there, this is what you're supposed to do. There's a lot of that in Deuteronomy. When you get there, this is what you're supposed to bring your crops to the temple, etc. So when you're there, if someone slain is found lying in the open, the identity of the slayer not being known, right? So there's a corpse that's discovered, out like, and you have to think about ancient times. There are, vast areas of unsettled land. More is unsettled than settled in the ancient world. And so corpses found. We don't know who the corpse is. They're not, people didn't have, wallets or cell phones. There's like no easy way to identify someone. And I think underlying this, as we may see, is it's also less likely than today that someone might be caught. Again, because there's, vast expanses where nobody is living, and, they don't have fingerprints, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a situation. A corpse is found. Your elders and magistrates shall go out and measure the distances from the corpse to the nearby towns. So they measure from wherever the corpse is found and figure out which is the nearest town, which is the nearest area of settlement. And then the elders of the town nearest to the corpse shall then take a heifer, which has never been worked, which has never pulled in a yoke, and the elders of the town shall bring the heifer down to an ever-flowing wadi, a stream, which is not tilled or sown. There in the wadi they shall break the heifer's neck. The priests, sons of Levi, shall come forward, for the Lord your God has chosen them to minister to God and to pronounce blessing in the name of the Lord. And every lawsuit and case of assault is subject to their ruling. Yeah, great. Then all the elders of the town nearest to the corpse shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the wadi, right? So there's this whole kind of strange ritual, and the Torah doesn't explain, why do this and why do that. But there's clearly this ritual to deal with this problem, and we'll come back to what the problem is. And the elders of the nearest town have to do this ritual and break the neck of this heifer, whatever that's about. And they make this declaration: our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. Absolve, O Lord, your people Israel, whom you redeemed, and do not let guilt for the blood of the innocent remain among your people Israel, and they will be absolved of blood guilt. Then you will remove from your midst guilt for the blood of the innocent, for you will be doing what is right in the sight of the Lord. Right, so they do this ritual, and the elders say, they take like an oath, like, we did not shed this blood, we did not see this happen. Please absolve us of what they're calling the blood of innocent, this kind of sense of blood guilt, right? So there's some sense here, I think underlying this, is that something has really gone wrong. Blood has been spilt, which, in the Torah, just as it is today, this is, a capital crime. It's a terrible sin. And there's something that's not resolved because the perpetrator is unknown. The assumption here is they didn't catch anybody. And there is this notion of blood guilt, that something is wrong in the world, and it can't exactly be fixed, but it requires a response, and that response falls upon the elders of the nearest city. So on the second page, there's a text from the Talmud, from Tractate Sotah, which comments on this and quotes the verse we just read. And they shall say, our hands did not spill this blood, nor did our eyes see. Right? Quoting Deuteronomy. This is what the elders are saying. And the Mishnah explains, and somebody asks the question that I'm sure if I paused here and said to you, well, is there something strange about what the elders are saying? Right? And the Mishnah says, but did it enter our minds that the elders of the court, I think it's supposed to be, are spillers of blood, that they must make such a declaration? Does anybody think that the guilty party in this murder is the elders of the nearest city? So why are the elders of the nearest city saying, we swear we didn't kill this person and we weren't witnesses to this event, right? In which case, even if they didn't kill, they obviously they have to come forward as witnesses. I mean, that's also a principle in the biblical tradition, that if you witness something, you have to testify. So why are they swearing this? It seems kind of absurd. Rather, they mean to declare, the victim did not come to us, and then we let him leave without food, and we did not see him, and then leave him alone to depart without accompaniment. And this is an added note. They therefore attest that they took care of all his or her needs and are not responsible for the death, even indirectly. Right? So what the elders are saying is, he didn't come to us in this city. We are the nearest city, right? So it's not unlikely that he might have stopped there on his journey. And we didn't send him off without food. And we didn't see him leaving and didn't provide for him accompaniment. And if you look in the Hebrew, the last word is livaya, which means accompaniment, to literally to go with somebody, to accompany them. And the Talmud continues, it's taught, Rabbi Meir would say that there is coercion, kofin, with regard to accompaniment. That is, you can, someone who doesn't want to accompany the traveler, you could say, no, you have to do it. And he goes on to say, and the reward for accompaniment is without measure, ein la shiur, which is a rabbinic expression for saying this is something of a very high value, right? There's no quantity, unlike lots of rabbinic stuff, like how much matzah you have to eat, how long do the Hanukkah candles have to burn. When it comes to certain things, there is no shiur, there is no measurement, there's no specific requirement, meaning you should do it full-heartedly, you should do it as much as you can, as expansively as you possibly could. So let's stop here before we go on, and sort of what struck you about this text, and about this, what the elders are saying that they did feel responsible for, and why do I think this text has something to say about responsibility, about what do we owe people that we have some connection to. So let me.
Well, first of all, it's like we didn't let him go without accompaniment. It's like, how far are you supposed to accompany people who are traveling? It's like, if they're traveling, you were so in the individual rights, kind of culture, but it's like, he gets to go wherever he wants. And like you said, do they say, no, we have to accompany you because it's our responsibility? Like at the hospital, when they put you in the wheelchair and it's like, I can walk just fine. And they're like, oh, no. We until you're out of our doors, we are responsible for you. And so you have to sit down in the chair and let us push you. It's like, okay, so I can get that as a concept, but it's like, how far are they supposed to accompany him? And are they only supposed to give food and feed travelers, but not the hungry in their cities? I mean, obviously they're supposed to feed the hungry, but it's like, it sounds like in this case, if he dies in any way because he fainted of hunger or whatever, that's on you because he was a traveler and you didn't feed him. But there's people dying in the city all the time from hunger and exposure and homelessness. So that never occurred to me before, that feels kind of, because he's a traveler? I mean, anyway, so. Like,
well, I think that the traveler in that sense is a person in need, because the truth is it was dangerous traveling in those days, right? I mean, there's, this, Rabbi, I mean, there's the Gomel blessing, which is supposed to say, if you've been in danger, right? So there are 3 or 4 categories, traditional categories. One of them is like if you were really sick and then you get out of the hospital, and so you say this you bench gomel is the Yiddish traditional way of talking about it. And the remnant is that people do that when they're traveling to Israel. I don't know if when they're traveling to Cancun, I'm not sure they're doing it, right? And I think that's a remnant of this notion that it was dangerous to travel in those days. It wasn't like these days where not
in Torah
really.
study and stuff, we talk a lot about the requirements around hospitality was because of this, that the traveler is not connected. The traveler doesn't have protection, doesn't have family to come after somebody who, hurts them or steals from them or kills them or whatever. And so, but I hadn't really thought about it in terms of levaya, like how far do you have to accompany somebody who's leaving your town?
Right. So
where does the responsibility end?
Right. So Rabbi Meir, the second one, says it isn't like you have to walk 2 miles. It sounds like you have to accompany them to the next town, right? To the next point of safety. Well, the whole point of this, that's not like, it's a mile away, just to the suburbs, like it's right. The whole point is they're vast areas, right? And in ancient times, it was dangerous traveling. And that's why you had caravans, and there was, a lot of robbers. So you'd have armed caravans and merchants would travel together because, it was dangerous where like today, it wouldn't even occur to you, I think. And so I think I think you're right to raise the question because it feels like, why is this so important? There's lots of other more important things. But the point I think is you see the responsibility of the town to someone who's just passing through, and to be helpful to that person. I see Susan has a raised hand. You have to unmute Susan. Susan, unmute.
I guess the space bar doesn't work in this case. I had a picture in my mind of somebody accompanying this person to the next village. And I guess, to answer my own question, it had to be more than one person accompanying the person to the next village. Because when the person gets to the next village, the person who's accompanied the person who's traveling, he has to go back. So, I'm just thinking that this is a little much. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Yeah.
I'll mute myself.
No, that's cute. I mean, it could be that as a native, he knows better how to make the trip, right? And knows, the people get robbed a lot over here, but if you go the other way, maybe that's okay. But you're right, and it's right. And, if they're really bandits, having two people may not help that much. But I think we don't want to, it's their reading of a biblical text when I don't think they weren't, I'm pretty sure this is true. They, in rabbinic times, with the temple long gone and stuff like that, they weren't bringing a heifer and breaking its neck. In other words, I don't think they did this ritual. And as typically the Talmud does, it's sort of saying, well, wait, what's going on here? And I think that, and that's why I think it's really an interesting text about responsibility, is that's how they're trying to read it. There's a sense that you have to do something, for this person. And the thing I want to point out, which underlines this, is that it could have said it's a really nice thing to accompany someone. It's a really nice thing to make sure that they have food for 3 days because that's how long the journey is. But it doesn't say this is a nice thing, or a good person would do this. This is what a pious person would do. It says that kofin, that means you're obligated to do it. This is, in a sense, the law, not like best practices. It's not an act of charity or this person always, that's their thing. They like to accompany people and they do that, out of their goodwill. No, it's this striking use of this word of kofin, which means like forced. You're obligated. You're obligated to do it. I wanted to, there's another, you may have heard this word, levaya, in a different context. Anybody besides the rabbi? Rabbi Amy, for 100 points.
Right. And actually, Michael, I talk about this at funerals a lot. Because people don't know what to do. They feel pretty helpless. We've had a lot of tragedies recently at KI. We've had a lot of funerals. No COVID, by the way, just all like really a 12-year-old, like really bad stuff. And I talk about this because I think it's so powerful that our word is not memorializing. Our word isn't, we have hesped where you celebrate, eulogize a person, but really there is no word for funeral. The word is accompaniment. And, levaya, same exact word. And I just think that's incredibly deep wisdom from our tradition, because it's what we can do. It's all we can do is accompany the dead as an act of respect, and also accompany, obviously, the family and the mourners. And that is a profound action that I didn't tie to this text before. But right, that both are saying accompaniment is a profound action of saying, I am responsible, and with calling a funeral a levaya means even after you're gone, I am responsible for you until you are in the ground, and I'm responsible to your family once you're in the ground. And that, it goes past even traveling from a city to another city, but in this sense, you're also responsible for not having them go in the ground, right? Like, and then when they are dead, we still have a responsibility. And I just think it's a really powerful thing.
Right. So, George, unmute yourself. George, you have to unmute yourself. George.
There it is.
Good work.
The responsibility and the accompaniment, it's all, that's terrific. But it is done, the people who are doing it in this instance are not guilty of anything. They are really being assigned the responsibility because of circumstantial evidence. They don't even know if it's the closest town. So I think this has to do with not individual responsibility who have done something wrong, but are we our brother's keepers? Are we responsible for what somebody has done? That's my question.
I think that's what that language of blood guilt. There's something wrong. There's something wrong in our society. In their society, right? That this could happen, and they can't exactly make it right, because they can't capture the criminal, and you could argue whether that makes it right, but at least there's some measure of justice, right? And I think it's, in that sense, the leaders, as leaders, have some responsibility for the society, right? But I can't make, I don't remember the quote exactly, but it's that sense like, some people are guilty, but, we're all bear some responsibility for the problems in our society. Like, I didn't make these people homeless, but I live in a city where there are thousands of homeless people, et cetera, et cetera. So, so I think the text here is really saying that there is a responsibility that the members of society have for what's going on, even if they're not guilty, right? That's exactly what we don't think the elders killed the person, right? We don't think he asked them for food and they said, nah, we only give to people who live in the city, you're on your own. But there's a recognition that something has gone wrong. And I think for me, it's a powerful, and it's more powerful when you take these issues like, again, whatever one you want to do, homelessness, racism, injustice, right? Because I think it's easier to see society's responsibility when it feels like it's a broader issue, not, in this case, one person killed this person, and that person is the killer bears basically the responsibility. But who bears the responsibility for people being homeless, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And it's complicated. And in a sense, this is also complicated, because if it was simple, they would just, well, we have a system of justice, and it works, but it doesn't. And I think this. I want to posit that this notion of accompaniment is a really powerful challenge and a way of thinking about, well, what is our responsibility? I'm sure some of you have heard of Brian Stevenson, who's done a lot of work on racism and criminal justice. And he talks a lot about proximity, that he sees, he urges us to feel proximate, to feel connected to other people. And he thinks when you feel proximate, then you see the person as a person, and broadly you act differently. And I think this is close to his expression, that levaya, accompaniment. And I would actually argue it's maybe even takes it another step, because it's an active principle, right? And I want to suggest that if this was taken broadly, it would be saying that we can't solve all societal problems. We want to try. We don't give up. We try and make it better, and everything better is better than it was. But what we certainly can do is try to ensure that people feel accompanied, that instead of feeling left behind, invisible, nobody cares about me, nobody really sees me, or when they see me in bad ways. And say, like, look, we can't solve all the problems, but you should know that we're accompanying you. We're not unaware. We're paying attention. We see the problems, and we share a common humanity, or we share a sense that our society is failing lots of people. And we want to say that loud and clear. And I don't know how that translates into public policy. What would a public policy of accompaniment mean? But I do think it's a really interesting thing to think about, and a challenging notion of that at least we have that responsibility. And what would it mean if everybody felt levaya, everybody felt accompanied? I was going to say this before, and I just wanted to add that, that in rabbinic times, first of all, people mostly lived in villages and smaller. They didn't have big cities. They had some, but and so when there was a funeral, literally, the whole community stopped, and everybody went to the funeral. And like here in New York, I don't know exactly what it's like out in your neighborhood. The cemeteries are very far away in New York, because everything close to Manhattan is more city. And the truth is, the custom is that only, immediate family and close friends go to the cemetery. People come to the service at the funeral home and or whatever. But in rabbinic times, everybody would go, and in fact, they would line the road to the cemetery, which usually was very close to town, because like who was going to go travel out in this dangerous, no man's land, right? So it was just outside of town, and they would line the way. There would be like 2 rows, which we have a remnant of in traditional custom. You do this at the cemetery as you're leaving, but everybody would line up, and the casket or whatever, the corpse, and the family would walk in between the mourners, and that's what you did. Everything stopped in town. Right? There's legal halakhic discussions about, well, if you have to say the Shema in the morning at a certain time, and the funeral is the same time, what are you supposed to do? I don't need to go into the specifics of it, but it was really a levaya. They really accompanied the body on its final journey to burial, and everybody in town went.
Michael, will you share the one about the Mashiach and like what you're supposed to like, and then levayas, funeral processions coming? Would you share that one?
I don't know if I know that one. Go ahead. I know about the planting the tree.
Yeah. The planting the tree. That's it. Yeah.
But is there one with levaya too?
Maybe
it could be. It wouldn't be the same thing. They would say, look, and I think there's also, part of it's, it's striking that even, you could see like, look, this is a living human being, and there's murder, or there could be murder. So life is an ultimate value. But now in a situation of funeral, obviously the person is dead, but there is this notion still of kavod hamed, of honoring the deceased. And it is, I think, it just struck me, it's an example of the community responsibility in action, right? It isn't just the elders or the funeral director or whatever, the rabbi. It's the whole town goes. The whole town would go,
I have this vivid memory of my year of rabbinical school, I was living in Beersheba in Israel. And I was living there when when Yitzhak Rabin was murdered. And I would take a bus every weekend to go hang out with friends in Jerusalem, because Beersheba is a, dust town. So I was taking a bus from Beersheba to Jerusalem, and we were, coming into Jerusalem, and his casket was coming, to go from where he had laid in state to where he was going to be buried. And it was on the news because it was all over the radio. And Israelis are addicted to, now I am too, Robin knows, to, news on the radio or on CNN, whatever. And so everyone knew exactly where the casket was. So the bus driver knew, and so did everyone traveling by car, knew where Rabin's casket was. And so everyone knew that we were close to it coming up the hill, and everybody pulled over. The bus drivers pulled over, and without one sound, which is something in Israel, not one sound, we all got off the bus. Any other bus in the area, everyone got off the bus. All the cars pulled over. Everyone stood outside of their car, and there was this profound silence and this profound screaming, witnessing in silence to his casket coming through all those cars on the bus. And I thought, this is so Jewish that, it's like there was 2 lines on either side, of the road, the highway, and we all got off, and we all stood, and we all waited for his casket to pass. And it happened all the way, for everyone else too down the road. And it just felt so like, oh, right, this is like Livaya coming to life in the land of the Jewish people and our customs. And I also think about, the times when I was growing up, when a hearse came by, all the cars pulled over. They stopped, they pulled over. Men took off, whatever hat they had on and put it on their heart. And like, there was a time where, and maybe it was just because I grew up in the South, I don't know, but like when you saw a hearse, everyone pulled over and everyone paid their respects. Everyone accompanied for that moment that casket and paid the ultimate respect, which was to stop what you're doing and show up. And we've kind of lost that. And like you said, it's immediate family and blah, 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 and only people who are invited. And should I go? Am I welcome there? You know, and it's so counter to like both the Jewish approach and what I used to understand as the American custom, which is you stop everything. And of course you show up. And anyway.
Yeah. You know, you only get that, you know, with, big public figures, I think, you know. And, you know, it is that notion of respect, which is also the Jewish kavod hamet, respect for the, I think of, Abraham Lincoln, after he was assassinated, his body, he was buried in Springfield, Illinois, where he was from. And there was a train that went from Washington, D.C. and, and people lined the tracks, all the way, from Washington, D.C. to Illinois to pay respect to Lincoln, and it would stop in certain places. And I think that was right. Yeah. So, so let's hold that notion of what could a company mean, and some of it is just carrying that intention, right? The intention to, not ignore, and let's take the traveler here as someone in need, right? Rather than, what do you mean? Like, why do they need my help? They're traveling. They probably have money for food, right? So, all right. So if we look at the next text, if you could just scroll a little bit so we see the whole text, great. So this is another Talmudic text. It's from Bava Batra, 7b. I knew it was someplace. And we're going to see that it doesn't talk about Levaya here, this accompanying, but it does have the other word that I feel is important in these texts, kofin. That is, you are obligated, right? So first we have the Talmud is, I'm going to the whole introduction. The Talmud has the Mishnah, which is the older rabbinic text, and then the Gemara, which is later rabbinic text, which comments on the early rabbinic text. So the Mishnah says the residents of a courtyard can compel each inhabitant. Compel is kofin. Each inhabitant of that courtyard to financially participate in the building of a gatehouse and a door to the jointly owned courtyard. So the thing you have to know is they're talking about they lived with courtyards and the sort of private homes were off of a shared courtyard. So from the street, you would walk into a courtyard and then you could go into people's individual homes. So what the Mishnah is saying is that if you are living in a courtyard, and some of the people in the courtyard say, well, we should build a gatehouse that is security, and a door, which I think has to do with privacy, for this jointly owned courtyard. Anybody who's living in the courtyard, whether they want to or not, needs to donate. They can be compelled to pay for their fair share of the cost of this gatehouse and door. And we won't even read Rabbi Strassfeld. Someone disagrees, but it's technically it's not important. So it's again an interesting thing that this isn't just You can imagine that we have these. It's a very contemporary issue, not about a gatehouse, but what do the tenants of a building, need to pay for, or of a co-op or a condo, this shared kind of property. It's different, obviously, in a single-family house, but even if you belong a single-family house in a community, do you have to contribute to if there's security service in that community? Do you have a choice, or do you have to contribute? So here it's saying that you need to contribute. And I said there's two things here. One is because there's this gatehouse, which has to do with security, and the door, which has to do, I think, with privacy, right? Because if you don't have this, people were living on the second story or the third story or in the 100th story. It was like basically the building's 1 story high in ancient times, right? So if you had a courtyard without a door, so everybody walking by on the street could see in and see whatever you're doing in your courtyard, right? It's, living in Manhattan, first floor apartments are not the most desirable for just that reason, because if you don't put your curtains or whatever down, people can see into your apartment. So there's a kind of loss on some form of ease of privacy, which you have on the second and third, et cetera. So what I think is interesting is I think we probably could all agree that everybody should be compelled to pay for security because everybody benefits from that. And the whole thing doesn't work if you say, well, I'm not going to pay, but I'm really glad I have my security, but I'm sticking it to you to pay for me, right? But someone could say, like, okay, I get the security thing, but privacy, if you want privacy, do it. I don't care. I don't mind people seeing me sitting in my shorts in the courtyard, drinking a beer or whatever I'm doing. That doesn't seem so important. Like, why do I need to be compelled to pay for that? The people that want that could pay for that, But that's not what it says. It says that even that, which is legitimate to want privacy, you can be compelled to contribute to the cost of it. So the Gemara now comes and asks, basically saying that, well, it seems to be that having a gatehouse is a good thing, right? Is this to say that making a gatehouse is beneficial? Because if you can force people to contribute to it, it must be a good thing, right? If someone says, well, I want to have a swimming pool, and other people say, I don't swim, I don't want a swimming pool, I'm not going to contribute. And I promise you, I will never go into the swimming pool. You can keep me out of the swimming pool. But, I just don't want it. Or I don't want, the tennis court or whatever, just not, I'm not interested, right? So, but the fact that it can be compelled, it feels like this must be for the common good. And actually, the Mishnah goes on, I didn't bring the whole Mishnah, it talks about, what about a city? So a city is allowed to have walls and a gate, right, to protect the city. And all the inhabitants of the city can be compelled to contribute to the cost of the walls and the gatehouse, the gate of the city. So the Gemara says, well, it seems to be this is a good thing. So they say, wait, but we're going to tell you a story. Wasn't there a pious man with whom the prophet Elijah was accustomed to speak? Right. So there's this pious guy, and Elijah, who's a particular figure in the Jewish tradition, right? The prophet Elijah goes up to heaven in a fiery chariot, and therefore Elijah never died. And Elijah comes back. He's getting ready to come back, in a couple of weeks and visit every single Seder in the world and drink all that kosher wine, which would be enough to kill anybody. But Elijah's supposed to be at every Brit, at every circumcision. And in folk tales, Elijah appears. And sometimes he brings food to people who are hungry, and now they have a Shabbat meal. He's this kind of mysterious figure that appears or saves the Jews from blood accusations in folk tales. And here in the Talmud, we have this notion that the prophet Elijah would come to this guy who was pious, and they would sit and schmooze. We don't know what, but clearly it's a mark of this person's piety, because Elijah just doesn't come to every Tom, Dick, and Chaim, right? So clearly this was a pious person, but then the pious person built a gatehouse, and afterward Elijah did not speak with him again. So wait, what happened here? So he builds a gatehouse, and Elijah stopped visiting. So from this story, we can learn that building a gatehouse must be a bad thing, because Elijah feels like this guy's not worthy going to speak with him anymore. He's not so pious if he built a gatehouse. So by the way, it's kind of interesting that the Gemara is asking a question about Jewish law based on a story, rather than based on Rabbi so-and-so disagrees and says it should be the opposite, right? Which is the normal legal arguments. It's on legal issues or I have a different precedent. Here they bring this story. It's kind of unusual, but interesting. They take it seriously. So the Gemara answers, the objection to the building of the gatehouse is the guard who mans or persons the gatehouse prevents the poor from entering and asking for charity, right? So here's what's wrong. The gatehouse has a guard who says, you can't come in here. It's my job to stop people who aren't visiting somebody in the gatehouse, inside the courtyard. I don't let strangers in. So sorry, you can't come in. So that seems to be the problem, but that doesn't answer our problem, right? Okay, so that's the problem of the gatehouse, but we still have the Mishnah saying that gatehouse is a good thing. So why did it say that when here it's saying gatehouse is a bad thing? And we explain why, because the guard stops poor people from coming in. So then the Gemara answers, this is not difficult. So this now gets typical Talmudic fashion. There's two kinds of situations. There's two kinds of gatehouses. There's a gatehouse that is built outside that prevents people from coming in, and there's a gatehouse that's inside that allows people to access the people in the courtyard. Or in other words, you're allowed to build a gatehouse as long as the effect of the gatehouse isn't to shut out the voices of the poor so they can't be heard, right? You can't create a situation where you cut yourself off from the reality that surrounds you, including the fact that there are people in need. So it is perfectly legitimate to say, I want security. It's even perfectly legitimate to say, I want privacy. But it's not legitimate to create a situation where the wall is so high or the access is so difficult that basically people in need in society no longer have access to you. And that's what the pious person apparently made, and that's why Elijah would stop visiting. So again, in a different way, I would say this is a text about, not about accompaniment, but maybe closer to Brian Stevenson about proximity, that you have to have a society which hears and therefore feels challenged by the problems in society, the problems of those in need, not structure it in a way that those people can be seen or heard. So let me stop here, and then we'll go to the third and final text. Any points, questions? Anybody in the gatehouse business want to?
Well, no, it makes me think of what they're doing right now with voting laws, changing voting laws, right? That it's like really meant to keep the voters out.
Yeah.
That there's nothing wrong with laws and rules. Of course, we want voting to be, legal, right? Okay, good, fair, whatever. So of course you want rules, and you need to have very strict rules because the result is really important. The leader of our country, or the leaders of our country. A gatehouse is fine. You want that. Everyone should have to, register to vote, but. Right. But when it becomes bad is when it's designed in a way that's really about keeping people out who don't have other access and don't have other ways other than this one to either make their voice heard or get charity or, whatever. So
nice. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Right. So you could say when it comes to voting, well, it needs to be secure, like security, like. We all agree on that, right? It should, you can't just say, anybody wants to come, just show up and vote. You don't have to be registered or, we trust you all. No. It has to be, security is perfectly legitimate. But limiting access is wrong. It's wrong. Yeah, I think it's I hadn't thought of this text in it, but I think it's a great text on that. It's a question of access, and you can do it in a way which gives you security, but still, gives access. So you can have absentee ballot, and you figure out a system where it's safe and secure, but let's have absentee ballots. Et cetera, et cetera.
And you might have days and times where the poor are allowed to come in and ask for charity, that you have to open the gatehouse at certain times to allow access, or whatever. But
Right. I mean, obviously it's a different society they're living in than ours, but, and not, right? Because, in some of the social situations, very different, right? So people live very far away from, there was, when I was working on my new book, hopefully find a publisher soon, but so I was checking about, I was curious whether in the Torah, you're supposed to leave the corners of your field and wheat that gets forgotten and dropped, et cetera, for the poor. That was their charity system because it was an agricultural society, so nobody had coins to give or anything like that. So you would just, leave part of your field and the poor would come and take the wheat or whatever the produce was. So I was curious, like now, and in the Middle Ages, they weren't in the land of Israel, so a lot of there were few Jews or whatever. A lot of the agricultural laws were sort of suspended. But I was curious now that back in the land of Israel, there are a lot of Jewish farmers. What do they do? And some of them are Orthodox or traditional. So what do they do? So the answer I got was, the problem is that system worked when the poor lived near the fields. So all they did was they would walk over, just like the cemetery. Everything was near. Everything was in walking distance. So you'd walk to the fields around the little village you were in, and you could get the wheat or whatever. Nowadays, you'd have to travel miles. So having it there, when the people in need have no way to get there, they don't have cars, let's say, then it becomes absurd, right? Supposedly, I guess no one's coming to pick up the corners of my field, so I might as well pick it up for myself because it's just going to go to waste, but a system that worked, doesn't work because the circumstances have changed, not only because now we're in a money economy, but just even if you wanted to do the corners of your field, it just wouldn't work anymore, even assuming that it worked in biblical times, which we have no idea. But anybody, I only see a few people at a time. So if there's anybody who wants to comment.
Missy, do you want to stop sharing for a second so we can see the grid?
Cool.
Susan?
Looks like nobody wanted to share.
Susan was going to share. I saw her hand up, but you have to unmute, Susan, and then talk.
I sent a request for her to unmute, so she should be able to click it. Is it working?
Okay, I got it.
Great.
No,
I'm Susan, sorry.
I just want to thank you because this is a part, like, when I read a part of Torah like this, my tendency is to read it historically and think, okay, this is what happened, and not search for a relevance to now. But our conversation tonight has given me a window into interpreting what I'm reading and the relevance it does have.
Well,
so thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. That's very nice. And that, Susan, that's actually the point of these sessions, is to say, these texts are really talking about today, and have something to say, or challenging, right? As I said, I don't know what accompanying would mean. I've tried to think about what would that mean in terms of, social policy. There was, for a time, I think this was in New York, maybe it was in Boston. I grew up in Boston. Someone decided to have, instead of just having one city hall, they had a bunch of little city halls all over the city, because in a sense I felt like, well, it makes it more accessible for people in the Bronx to go someplace in the Bronx rather than to travel into Manhattan, and, a place that maybe they're not that familiar with, et cetera, et cetera. It no longer exists, so I don't know whether it was a good idea on paper or it wasn't done well or whatever, but I remembered it when I was trying to think about this, and it felt like, is what Rabbi Amy said about accessibility is a big piece of this. If I feel I have access, then I feel, well, like I'm in the picture. It hasn't solved my problem, but at least I know I can put my 2 cents in, and it at least gets somewhat heard, right? But if I feel like that nobody's listening, I have no access, I might as well not be here. I think that's very difficult.
Another one that I just was brought up on short on this week was Rabbi Denise Ager gave this wonderful talk on her new book that is a collection of blessings and rituals for LGBTQ plus people. And someone asked her something about gender non-binary and trans, whatever. And she said, one of the things we can do, and I need to figure out how to do it permanently because I have to do it every time, is put in parentheses, she, hers. And I'm like, because I have resisted that. Because it's like, well, I'm not gender non-binary. It's pretty clear to most people, like, who I am. And she said, but what it does is it lets queer people, trans people, gender non-binary people know that you see them, that you don't assume that everyone knows you're a cisgendered female, and or that you identify as she, her, even though you are a cisgendered female on the outside. So I just never thought about it that way in terms of accompanying, that it's like, yeah, I don't need to put she, hers, because it's like, duh. But it says to other people, I see you, and I accompany you by identifying my pronouns to suggest we don't have to be in a binary world, and it shouldn't, we should all not be so obvious about who we call she or him, and I never thought about it that way about Livaya, about accompaniment, but I do now. I kind of would use that language now, I think.
Yeah, nice. Lisa, do you have your hand up? I see a hand, but no picture, so I don't know.
Where do you see a hand?
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. That was
your hand? Great, Michael. Great.
My cat. No, that the little arrow thing. By putting it on someone's box, it turns into a hand. Sorry. Okay, let's go quickly to the last text. Missy, if you could put that on the screen. So this is a text from Pirkei Avot. Yeah, a little higher so we can see the whole text. Right, perfect. From Pirkei Avot, which is ethics of our ancestors. And it talks about in chapter 5 it's all these like pithy statements, quoting the rabbis, etc. Talks about there's 4 types of characters. There's a lot of that in Pirkei Avot. And the Sodom, evil city, is mentioned here. And in the rabbinic tradition, they're like the embodiment of evil, the people of Sodom. And there are lots of midrashim about what they did and how they were evil. But again, it's not the important, and I want to make sure we have enough time to look at this and talk about it. So it says, Arba midot b'adam, there are 4 types of characters in human beings. The first, Omer shali shali, v'shelcha shelcha. Mine is mine and yours is yours. This is the commonplace, average. But then it says, Zu midah beinonid. It's, that's what ordinary people would say. Mine is mine and yours is yours. And then it says, V'yeshomim, and some people say, here's another opinion, Zo midat Sodom. This is the quality of the people of Sodom. So we'll come and try and figure out what that is. It seems a strange comment. And then it goes on, and you can probably guess where it's going to go. Shali shalcha, mine is yours, but shalcha shali, and yours is mine, is an am haaretz. They say an unlearned person. You might say an idiot, if you want. Mine is yours, and yours is mine. Like, that doesn't make much sense. Shali shalcha, shalcha shalach chassid. Mine is yours, and yours is a pious person. He's a chassid. That's the same guy as was talking to Elijah in the other text, right? So he's like, mine is yours, and yours is everything. I renounce everything, right? So that's a pious person. And you can imagine the opposite, right? Mine is mine, and yours is mine. That's a rasha. That's a wicked person. So those 3, the second, third, and fourth, that seems like, sometimes I find Pirkei Avot is like, that's stating the obvious, and sometimes it's really interesting. So in this one, I think the first one is the one that's really interesting, because on the surface saying mine is mine and yours is like, Yeah, that's what most people would say. It feels ordinary. So why calling it Midat Sodom, the quality of the people of Sodom, is really harsh, right? It's almost worse than Rasha, wicked. It's like super wicked, right? So what could that possibly mean? Anybody want to? Amy, is that my hand again? Yeah, I did the same thing. Sorry.
Indifference, like mine's mine, yours is yours. I don't care. I don't want to talk about it. I got it. We don't need to have public policy discussions. Okay, whatever. I have my stuff. You have your stuff. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
Like, disengagement, a disinterest, disenfranchisement that I don't know that Stum got to that place where they were destroyed for really not caring, and then not caring can lead to actively harassing or actively I don't know what the connection is, but
yeah no I think again, think in the context of the text we've seen tonight, right? I think Amy's right? It's mine is mine, yours is yours. Your problem is not my problem. I'm taking myself. I'm not bothering you. So, don't bother me, right? I made it on my own. I worked hard, and, you should work hard, and I hope you succeed. I wish you well. It's not like I wish you ill, but not my problem. Yeah. Right. Susan just said, not taking responsibility for another, right? Right. So it's the opposite of accompaniment. It's the opposite of feeling this compulsion to be involved with other people. There's a George, are you raising your hand? Yeah, you have to unmute.
I sent something for him to unmute himself, so hopefully he got it. Okay, there.
Yes. There is, of the four types, of course, these are four types, there's a middle type. For example, mine is mine and yours is yours, except I believe in progressive taxation, which is sort of in the middle.
Yeah, nice. We're going to add a new Yeshomrim, some people say. George says, right? Good, thank you, that's nice. Wait, I see someone added something in the chat.
Do you want me to unshare my screen, or do you still want it up?
Do people want to still look at this, or you don't need to? Well, what am I asking there? They're all muted.
Most people are saying no, they don't need it up. But
okay, so let's do that so that everybody can see each other. So let me in the rabbinic tradition, in the Talmud, there's a number of places in the Talmud that talks about Midat Sodom, this behaving like the people of Sodom. And one example that's given is there's two brothers, and one of the brothers has bought a piece of land that's next to his father's piece of land. And when the father dies, the brother with the land next to the father says to his brother, he says, look, I would really like to inherit, the part. I mean, each of us is getting half of Dad's land. I'd like to get the land that's contiguous, that's next to the land I already have. Each plot is worth the same amount. It's not one's better, one's better land for planting or anything. It's equally the same. It's just, it'd be nice for me to have this land that's, next to it. And the brother says no. And the Talmud says, a word you know by now, kofin oto. They forced that brother to agree that his brother gets the land that's next to his already. And it turns out that Midat Sodom in some places in the Talmud is when you could do something for somebody else at no cost to yourself and you don't do it. Like the land was equal. It wasn't like there was a debate about which piece of land is the better property, right? Which could easily happen, of course. But it was no skin off your back, whatever metaphor you want to use. And basically, Midat Sodom is being mean-spirited, where it shouldn't make a difference, and you could easily just say yes and do a nice thing, and it doesn't cost you anything. You don't even have to accompany them to the next town or anything like that, like a trip you don't want to take. And Midat Sodom is like, yeah, I'm just going to say no because I can, because I'm not a nice person, right? I'm from Sodom, like that, right? So in a way, I think one way to understand this was said is that if mine's mine, yours is yours, but leave me alone, right? It's not just neutral. It's not just, that's the fact, right? Of course, yours is yours and mine's mine. Okay, end of the story. It's actually, in that sense, not the end of the story. The story is we're all together. The story is we're accompanying each other, not just the traveler, right? Not just the person in need who's at the gatehouse trying to get someone to pay attention to him, but we're all in need. We're all on this journey. And we want to do this together and have some sense that we're connected. That it isn't just about like, I have everything I need. That end of the story, don't bother me. I'm not interested in contributing to the community. I don't go to the opera. I don't care what happens with that. Whatever it is, like, not my business. Just don't come to my door. Nobody comes to the door anymore, but don't call me on my cell phone ever, and that, that's, and what's interesting again in that case in the Talmud is that they take what is attitudinal. I think, in Pirkei Avot isn't law, the ethics of, it's like, that's just not the way to behave. Right? These are teachings. These are wisdoms. It isn't like law, but it actually becomes law. That uses that language again of kofin. We think this is so reprehensible. We're going to tell the brother, we're actually going to rule against you, even though there's actually no law that says this. We're going to say we're not doing it this way. Your brother's getting the land. End of story. That's the way we create community and build community. And I think you see here over and over again that they're moving from, look, this would be the nice thing to do, to saying, you know what? This tradition pushes people to do the right thing. Not always, not all the time, but on some of these things, we want to hold ourselves to a higher standard, even if it isn't completely legal, on the legal principles. And it's an interesting that some of these things over time really become, like Midat Sodom, become a legal principle in the halachic system that can be quoted by an authority to say, we decided this because of this. So let me stop there.
I'm studying with a bar mitzvah student whose parsha includes, don't separate yourself from the community. It's like the counter side, to this accompanying everybody is al tifrosh min hatzibur, because I think it's so easy for us. I got a phone call today and it's like, I muted myself on Zoom to hear, what the message is and the voicemail. And it was like, I am so Rabbi so-and-so calling about things in Iran. And I'm like, oh my God, no. I'm busy. I have too much to do. I can't deal with Iran. I can't do anything about Iran. No. And then it's like, wow, Aim, really? All too frosh me at Seymour. Like, really? You can't even give like this much room to seeing what he wants? It's like, no. Like, not only am I not going to accompany, I'm going to like withdraw from the world community because I can't. Like, I just can't. And I think it's the positive and the negative way of talking about. It's so easy to pull in to what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, don't bother me. And that seems when we first read it, like, how could that be like stone? Really? That's a bit of an overreaction. But really, that attitude, the more that happens, the more separated we feel from other people's suffering, other people's pain, other communities' pain, other countries' pain. Like, it's a slippery slope once we start not accompanying, building gated communities. Once we say what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, don't bother me. It's like this progression to, I don't really have to care. And it's tempting. I got to tell you, it's tempting. And I'm just aware that the rabbis were so on top of it. Like, we haven't changed that much as human beings, and our human nature is still, I can't. Like, you stay over there. What's mine is mine. Like, my family's good. Thank you very much. And it's just a dangerous slope. But I so appreciate your teaching because I think it's so important, particularly now when people are like in their, in their things, or they've been working and they're being in there behind their shield and behind their masks. And we're all just kind of endangered by each other in a way that we're starting to come out of, but we're still wanting to be protective. And so I so appreciate these teachings about calling us forward, that the tradition says, yeah, we got that. That's okay. But that's not how we do this. So I truly appreciate the choice of these texts, Michael.
I think I'm just struck by these texts and, others, which are really, calling us to, or go back to that the principle we started, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zebedeh, we're all responsible for each other, right? Again, expanding it from just Israel to, we're all responsible for each other, right? And that, I think I hear that differently, after the Midat Sodom, right? Because what I'm saying is, look, I'm fine. You should be fine. You look fine. Why? But that's not the way it's supposed to be. Like, we're all connected. We live in a connected world. We know that now more than ever before in terms of environment. And it's really calling us to. And yet I think it's, there's always some balance, right? You can't, I'm struck by the Altif Rosh Minat Tzibur, but it's also true you can't be involved in every cause. You can't, right? And in that sense, I like the fact that you could say, I actually want privacy in my courtyard. I have legitimate needs. Right. And so how do you juggle those things? And of course, the tradition doesn't come up with exact answers, which is the challenge, right? It's like, okay, when is this a situation of accompaniment? And when this is beyond anything I can do much about, and how much doing is enough? Like, if I give this much because I can't do everything, and and I can't give every place. So, these are all like hard and difficult choices. But I think the attitude that's called for here is one of accompaniment, one of connection, one of caring, not of the people of Sodom. There's a great midrash of the people of Sodom. They said, it's hard to believe that this is a midrash rather than was written like last week. They said, we live in this wonderful place. It's very fertile. There's fruit on all the trees. I'm paraphrasing, and there's lots of gold and silver, and we're doing great, right? And they say and we actually don't really want to share it with the people who are coming now. So what we're going to do is make sure they don't have any access to what we have, right? So they're not even pretending that, look, we made it. We worked hard. We came from nothing. We were immigrants. They're just we have it. They don't. And we're going to use the law in Sodom to make sure that doesn't change. So what's really bad about them, I think, and from this midrash, isn't just they don't want to be hospitable to strangers. They do the opposite when strangers come to town. They're happy to send them out to starve. They want to get rid of them right away, right? So they're completely inhospitable. They don't care, right? It's more than that. It's not that it's a town where people are inhospitable. It's against the law to be hospitable in Sodom. So they use the legal system to ensure their values and to ensure that nobody can get what they have, right? And that's why they're the ultimate, evil society.
Well, we're bumping right up against that.
That's why I say it's hard to believe this wasn't written last week.
Bumping right up against.
It's just right, and it's it's this inequality, and they were just. It was so corrupt there. They were just completely honest about it, as it were. But that's the opposite, right? The opposite of a society of accompaniment, of proximity, of caring, of the prophets who speak truth to power and call for justice.
Amen, amen, amen. We should write an article. You should write an article, Michael Strassfeld. Amen. Eshkoch. I have heard from so many people who have listened to these classes afterwards, people who've been in the class, just how incredibly warm you are for somebody who's as brilliant as you are. And it is true that to have those two things come in the same package is a rare thing. And truly your warmth and welcome for everybody to feel comfortable engaging wherever they are, whatever their level of learning is. They have felt really welcomed by you, really informed by you, and very engaged in the conversation, even if they're not talking. And so I want you to know that as a teacher and a Rav that you still got it. And for my people, thank you for showing up. And thanks for engaging and listening and being here and digging into this amazing stuff when there's so much other stuff going on and things are opening up. And I know everybody's getting crazy and getting busy, and but that you've remained intent on bringing your full selves here. I really appreciate that about all of you. So I'm sure this will not be the last time we engage Rabbi Strassfeld. And thank you.
Well, thank you all. And hopefully one day, not so far in the future,
you'll be here.
I will come to California and we could study together in person.
We would love that. We would love that.